East Hampton Town Board, we are live.
Thank you, LTV. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the East Hampton Town Board work session of Tuesday, February 3rd, 2026. Michael, if you could please read the roll call.
Councilmember Flight.
Present.
Deputy Supervisor Lease.
Present.
Councilmember Rogers.
Present.
Councilmember Calder-Piedmont.
Present.
Supervisor Burke-Gonzalez.
Present. If we could all please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this morning, we're going to start with public portion. We ask you to kindly keep your comments to 3 minutes. And then we have 4 agenda topics. First is bids with Jeannie Carrozza. Then Becky Hansen will take us through another pass at the draft 2026 capital plan. That'll be followed by a discussion of the East Hampton Town Airport with Jim Brundage, Katie Van Hooven, and Nick Regano. We'll talk about future improvement requests, recommendation for fee increases, and the readoption of former Chapter 75 pursuant to an order of the Supreme Court. And lastly, we will have a discussion of the Osborne Homestead Draft Management Plan with Scott Wilson. That'll be followed by liaison reports and then resolutions. So let's start with public portion. Michael, has anyone signed up? Jason, is there anyone on the line?
Yes, we currently have 3 callers on the line. I will unmute the first.
Okay, great.
Hello, caller ending 1641. You're on the air.
Hello, my name is Mark Franz. Good morning, everyone. I live with my wife, Mary, at 7 Cobber Lane in Wainscott, about a mile from the airport. I'm speaking today to urge the board to tie any airport improvements, in particular a permanent air traffic control tower, to binding commitments on curfews and volume limits, whether voluntary or mandatory. The seasonal tower has served this airport adequately for years. A permanent tower without accompanying operational limits signals that the town expects or accepts year-round high-volume operations indefinitely. That is inconsistent with this community's long-standing concerns about noise, safety, and environmental impact. I would also urge the town to invest in a public data dashboard that tracks flight operations and voluntary curfew compliance by operator. Voluntary programs only work if compliance is visible. A dashboard transforms an honor system into a reputational incentive and costs a fraction of what we're proposing to spend on a tower. If aviation interests are about to receive significant public investment, the community deserves to know what we're getting in return. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Jason, if you could please put the next caller through.
Doing that right now. Caller ending 0673. You're on the air.
Good morning, Supervisor and members of the Town Board. This is Erin Sweeney with the East Hampton Community Alliance. I would like to thank the board for prioritizing the routine maintenance of the airport, and I would also like to express our support for no increases in landing fees for local pilots. They're members of our community, they support the airport, and that's really important to us. We look forward to a continued open dialogue with the board, the community, and good luck, and we will be listening closely to what the airport director presents today. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Jason, if you could please put the next caller through.
Absolutely. Caller ending 4221. You are on the air.
Thank you. Good morning, Town Board. This is Jane Meering. I'm calling in to make some comments in advance of your discussion later in the meeting about the next draft of the management plan for 66 Wainscott Main Street. I also want to identify myself today as speaking as a member of the Wainscott Heritage Project Board and an individual resident of East Hampton, and I'm not at all commenting as a member of any appointed town board. So first I want to say thank you to the board again, and for the Property Management Committee and Scott Wilson during the prior work session in November about the first draft of the management plan. You all agreed to consider the Wainscott Heritage Project submission of some comments and recommendations for modification of the draft, and that accompanied your decision to hold off on a public hearing. And I imagine now with the second draft, you are going to want to go to public hearing quickly. So I'm just going to touch on a few critical comments today, and then we'll hold everything back for that public hearing. So first, a few points. So just in terms of the second draft of point one, anytime that the doc talks about public use, we think it should be qualified with the terms passive, low intensity, public enjoyment, and public access. Point two, the document, the draft says that any and all alterations, the draft still fails to say, which was a recommendation, that it should say that any and all alterations, renovations, restoration, or any other changes must align at a minimum with the historical landmark guidelines and be evaluated and guided using the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties. That is the standard for CPF, and it should be stated explicitly in the document. Point three, where it talks about respect to licensees, the doc says the town may seek not-for-profit licensees, but I think we believe that it should say that all licensees should represent not-for-profit organizations that relate to the various reasons for which this was acquired. And fourth, there are gaps in the document that really relate. The bulk of the gaps in the document relate to primarily to the section, quote, remainder land beyond the structure, which you see on page 6 and 7, and the 4 points that are laid out there. This notion of a buffer to the pond, that's not sufficient to the standard or protection for potential agricultural uses. Point 2, the multi-use path. We've had much discussion about how a mowed path and potentially just an in and out, rather than it now continuing to state only about multi-use and a loop. Point 3, the striking of the no deer fence is really problematic. There really should be a discussion about no deer fence, no additional structures significant to develop. And point 4, this preference for meadow, fallow field, hopefully could be emphasized more as an appropriate use. Finally, the biggest gap in this document related to the management plan is the failure, sorry to use that word, failure to put the town historic landmark designation over the entirety of the parcel, as was originally part of the draft resolution for the CPF acquisition. And doing so is necessary and would be fully consistent with what the CPF and the town board has done with respect to other recent CPF acquisitions, the Fisher House, the Dodge property, Brooks Park. So getting that resolution drafted to public hearing and adopted for full landmark designation hopefully should be the priority before even getting this management draft to public hearing. And of course, we look forward to hearing your robust discussion later today, and always thank you for considering our comments.
Thank you, Jane. Jason, is there anyone else on the line?
Yes, we had 2 callers join during that time, so I shall unmute our newer caller. Hello, caller ending 3448. You're on the air.
Good morning, Town Board. This is Hersey Egginton. I'm calling in to make some observations about the improvements proposed to the airport. My wife Quincy and I reside at 15 Hedges Lane, a private road in Wainscott, several hundred yards from the airport property and directly under one of the primary approaches to the airport runway. The reason I'm calling, and I'm sorry I'm not there in person, but I'm suffering from a bit of a head cold. I'm calling in to urge the town board to use the proposed safety improvements to the main runway, specifically repaving and repainting, to gain concessions from the airport litigants on volume and scheduling of landings and takeoffs. In addition, I recommend that real-time noise monitoring equipment be utilized in locations around the airport to supplement neighborhood complaint data. I know that these suggestions are in line with the primary goal for the airport operations, which is, and I quote, maximized protection for the environment and a community-compatible airport, especially for airport neighbors, end quote. Thank you, Town Board, for your consideration.
Thank you, Hersey, and feel better.
And we have one more
Is
caller.
there- Great.
Caller ending 0299.
Thank you. Yes, good morning, Town Board. This is Carolyn Logan Gluck calling, and I wanted to echo some of the comments that were made by my colleague on the board of the Wainscott Heritage Project, Jane Muring, regarding the revised draft management plan for the Osborne Homestead. Thank you for bringing this back to a work session, and thank you for some of the changes that you made to the first draft. The most important one, in my view, is the expansion of the mission statement to include preservation of the historic scenic viewshed as a key guiding factor in the management of the property moving forward. In that regard, there is some inconsistency within the document, namely as to how the land could or would be used. Agricultural use, of course, is a historic use of the land. However, agriculture farming is practiced in somewhat different ways now than it was historically, and that might come into conflict with preservation of the viewshed. And I know particularly the elimination of point number 3, which initially stated that there would be no deer fencing, has been eliminated, and I strongly urge you to reconsider that. And even members of the community have said there are crops that can be grown that don't need deer fencing. Certainly deer fencing of any kind would be most intrusive. I also hope that you will revisit the idea of allowing a multi-use path, which also is not consistent with the historic use of the land, and encourage a mown or a natural stone path rather than a multi-use path as a means for visitors to the property to gain access to the pond. And finally, I do ask you to consider historic designation for all the land beyond the structures. I hope you've received the letter of interest from Wainscott Heritage Project regarding a lease of the Osborne House, and we would look forward to engaging with you further regarding details of what we see for that. So thank you very much for taking the time to hear my comments today, and I look forward to hearing your discussion. We're just thrilled that this property is being preserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Jason, is there anyone else on the line?
We have no callers. No
Is
new
there anyone
callers.
in the room here that want to make a comment to the town board? Okay, so we are now going to move on to our topics. Jeannie, you're up for bids. Good morning, Jeannie.
Good morning. All righty. The first bid to accept is for the replacement of reels at East Hampton Airport. The reels are the runway and identifier lights. Baseline King is the apparent low bidder. The dollar amount for the bid is $54,600. The next bid to accept is the second house road raising. Keith Grimes is the apparent low bidder for that one in the amount of $928,525.87. Next, we did bids for the Human Services Department for dairy products, frozen food, and groceries. So 3 separate bids. The apparent low bidder for that one is Mavilla Foods of New York. Next, we have an extension of the agreement for the Hampton Hopper, which is the East Hampton Commuter Connection shuttle. And the new per diem costs for the CPI this year or going forward on the new contract is $2,211.79 per day, up from $2,143.21. The extension of the contract for traffic signal maintenance, Hink Electric has agreed to extend. The next extension is for the supply and delivery of Hino truck parts. Gabrielli Truck Sales has agreed to extend. And finally, we'll do a notice for an RFP for next week, which is for the technology solution for managing compliance with short-term rental regulations. And that's all for today.
Great. Questions?
No, just a comment to Madam Supervisor. The second house road raising is a long time coming. It's been on the board 9 years. It started before that. That is in partnership with PSE&G or the Long Island Power Service Company right now, and it would be funded by them. So it's part of the betterment process that was out there for some of their infrastructure needs. And I appreciate Jeannie and all for working on that, including Rebecca Hansen, who really assisted with it too.
Jeannie, could you just repeat the daily contract amount for the hopper? I didn't quite catch that.
Oh, sure. Let's see here. $2,211.79, and that will be effective April 1st.
Thank you.
And I just want to add that I'll be speaking about the bid going out for technology for short-term rental in my liaison report.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on to the draft 2026 capital plan. Welcome, Becky.
Good morning, Becky Hansen, Town Administrator. Good morning, Supervisor, members of the Town Board. I was here on January 20th and presented the first draft of the 2026 capital plan. Since that presentation, I've received some additional requests and revisions from you as board members and other departments as well. So just for a quick recap, the adopted 2025 plan totaled $13,073,400 and compromised 121 projects. The first draft of the 2026 plan totaled $15,924,980. Subsequently, the revised plan that I'm going to review today has totaled $17,355,980, and it's 98 projects so far. It might seem like a really big jump from the prior year, but bear in mind that there are two very large projects on this year's list that alone total $4.5 million. One is the replacement of the Sammy's Beach bulkhead and upgrades to the Lieutenant Lee Hayes Youth Park, which again, we spoke about on the 20th, that the town has requested state funding for those projects. So I will just briefly go through changes received from January 20th. So in buildings and grounds, even though this is not 2026, but in 2027, $200,000 was added for the Amagansett public parking lot lighting upgrades. That will be work in tangent with the project to expand the municipal parking lot and park also. The Springs Library window replacement project, we also added on that it will be a maintenance project as well. For the Springs Library parking lot improvements, the entire project is now proposed to take place in 2026, which will be engineering and construction. Previously, just the engineering was proposed for 2026. So the entire project has been moved to 2026. On the Highway Department, we did reallocate a project for truck refurbishment of $150,000 to 2027. The Highway Department does have unspent proceeds from prior capital year plans. In addition, in year 2028, funding was added for the annual projects for drainage and sidewalks for a total of $395,000. For Natural Resources Department, the fast charging station installations was moved to 2027, but that is likely that will be fully funded by a state grant. And if that is the case, that's certainly something that can be moved to 26. Again, as long as the town is going to be receiving the funds back. Let's see, in the police department, the annual fleet vehicle replacements, the town, that is now highlighted yellow. The town received word that federal funding that was requested by the town last year will be coming through. So we are going to be using that funding source to offset the purchases for 2026.
So that was a request that we made to Congressman Lalotta. Because after meeting with him, I guess a year ago, we had talked about how the federal government could help us with grants for police fleet vehicles. And so it sounds like it passed both the Congress and the Senate, or and we were waiting for the president's signature.
Right, and the funding will be funneled to Suffolk County, and then Suffolk County will be allocating the funds to the local governments.
And Becky, if I could just jump in here, because there's a new item on here on the second line, land acquisition for Montauk Police Substation. We're looking at this as a new multi-department public safety center in Montauk. It's something that we've discussed here for years. It's a proposal to establish, a multi-department public safety center that would house the town's police department, Marine Patrol, town lifeguards, East Hampton Volunteer Ocean Rescue, and code enforcement operations in a single centralized location. This would be located at 68 South Elmwood Avenue in Montauk. It wasn't brought up on the 20th because we were in negotiations with the D'Agostino family, and it was premature because the contracts hadn't been signed. But this was something that we've been working on as a board, and we feel that there's a real need for a shared modern facility that will function for today's operation, staffing, and equipment in operation, and needs coordination needs in Montauk. And I know, David, you've been running point on this and been working diligently on getting this done.
Correct. Yes, this has been a need. We believe this has been discussed in the Beach Advisor Group for multiple years to have a coordinated facility for storage, but also for that's modern to the needs of the hamlet of Montauk, which is one of our greatest visited hamlets in all of the Hamptons, we want to say. This facility would blend into the community. Design will come later, but overall targeting the piece of property right now, and working with the D'Agostino family under your leadership, we're finally there. I did mention this to the Montauk CAC last night, and there was a lot of almost a joy and relief knowing that the current facility, the current Montauk precinct, is past its useful life right now. There's no plans for that facility right now, but this is the first step is to acquire land. So I thank the town board members. I know Tom as a Montauk resident on there, and to a facility in Montauk that betters the public safety of the residents and visitors of Montauk is sorely needed right now.
And Chief Sarlo is here. I don't know, Chief, if you wanted to say a few words too. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, just very briefly, this is a tremendous opportunity to continue to move forward and modernize our services that we provide to the community. Obviously, our current building was donated to the town somewhere in the early 80s, and it was basically a prefab building that we've continued to try to piecemeal together and make function for our uses over the years. It's sort of reached a point where there's not a whole lot left we can do other than tear it down and rebuild it to modernize it as to how it would be needed. This project and opportunity gives us a clean slate and a fresh start, and the ability to, as David has mentioned, really use our public safety committee focus to put everyone kind of in the same place and modernize and streamline our services that we provide to the community. Montauk obviously sees an extreme increase in volume of work for all of the public safety agencies during the summer season, and it's the highest volume of calls for service that we receive. And obviously between the lifeguards, Marine Patrol, code enforcement, there's a lot of efforts that need to be focused in the Montauk Hamlet in the summer, and having a facility like this, along with improved and increased storage, is just phenomenal increase in efficiency for the community and for us. So thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Chief. All right, Becky.
So continuing to other departments, there was an update made within the sanitation department for the license plate reader purchase, and it will be additional site security at the location. Also added, sorry, just above that, the payloader. The town will apply for a state grant for that. It is eligible up to 50% of the cost. Unfortunately, those grants with New York State are years behind schedule. Believe it or not, we are actually just getting funding on some projects from 2017 from New York State. So the good news is that means debt service has already been paid on that, so it just goes into fund balance for that particular fund. But anyway, so to fund the changes that have been added to this current proposal, again, the $300,000 was added as a grant for the police vehicles. An additional $50,000 was proposed to be allocated from the A fund or whole town fund balance, which has been updated on the spreadsheet as well. In addition to the 50% for the sanitation purchase. So that will still bring us down to the town under this plan is proposing to issue $387,000 less in debt than you are retiring for 2026. So the schedule going forward would be, as long as you agreed to a plan today, whether it's this version or any other agreed upon changes, you can adopt the plan on Thursday, and then the plan will be sent to bond council to start drafting bond authorization resolutions that you can adopt at the March 5th meeting, in addition to a resolution appropriating fund balance. And I will note that that is a full month ahead of where the town board last year, you actually adopted your capital plan in 2025 on March 6th last year. So you are a month ahead of schedule, which allows departments to start projects and put things out to bid, earlier than in prior years.
Questions for Becky?
Questions for Becky and for the board generally. Thank you for including the Amagansett municipal lot in there. My only question would be, could we move, I think it's about 37 to 40,000 into 26's budget? That would just allow the engineering team to get working on this project for 27. That would be my only request.
Sorry, Tom, what was the amount?
About 40,000. I think it's 37.5, but it might change.
Thanks.
Okay. That sounds reasonable to me. Is everybody supportive?
Yeah, it's very similar to what we're doing, engineering, 1 year construction, yes.
Any other questions or comments for?
Just two, if you don't mind. We have cap left over for license plate readers in the police department line. We put in for 9,000. I need to make that 20,000 because that would bring us up to the amount where we'll be able to get another four camera license plate reader for one of our districts right now. So that would be the change that allows for the cameras, but also the systems that have to go into another vehicle. And we would be able to put 3 on the road and give us redundancy, or also into another district too. And there's just the 2 other ones. I know in Parks, applying for the grant for the hybrid car truck, I think that's through NYPA. That'd be great to look into that. There's an opportunity.
Right. The reason I didn't highlight it just because I wasn't 100% on the funding source yet, but obviously anything in here that is subject to a grant, we will absolutely apply for it.
And you will also see just long-term, I've had conversations with the Army Corps of Engineers, keeping a little bit forward to my liaison report. They're going to be, the notice to proceed has been authorized for the removal of 3 of the broken, the crossovers, not the one at Surfside Place. And I know years ago we put in the cap line, I think it's about 240,000. So very shortly, we might not need that. I know that might play into room for next calendar year, but that's something also that's coming forward into there be space for the calendar year 27.
Right, again, and that's part of our annual process. So the town holds its annual debt sale in August, which is when you issue new debt and you roll old debt. By June, that is our deadline to come up with our firm number is, especially when it comes to the old debt, what old debt are we going to continue? And that's where we take a closer look and work with all of the departments and say, they get a nice email asking them to take a look at their current projects and old money, and that if a purchase order is not going to be issued within 6 months, that we are going to close the project out, because the town, it doesn't make sense for the town to continue to hold on to old money, especially if it was a larger amount that a bond was issued and you're paying down debt service on that, so you're losing money. So the last few years, the finance department has really scrutinized the old debt that has been out there. So we've been able to retire a number of projects. I know the supervisor has mentioned it numerous times during our budget process, or just this process in general. So retiring that debt, in the case that Councilmember Lease is saying, in the case of the crossovers, if we're not going to use that money come June, we will close the project out, so we're not incurring additional payments on it.
Thank you for the explanation.
Great. Is everyone good with increasing the license plate readers for the police department from 9,000 to 20,000?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So those two changes? I think this is ready to.
I just have just a couple of comments.
Sure.
I want to thank the board and Becky for moving the Springs Library parking to 2026. I think that's an important project, not just for the library, but for the whole heart of Springs, which hosts a lot of events in the summer with inadequate parking. And I also want to clarify the Springs Library windows, that the maintenance, and from your introduction, it sounds like this is the case, but maintenance refers to maintenance of the facility in general,
Right,
and
the
not
entire
just the
building.
windows. Just the way that's phrased, I want to make sure we all have the understanding that I expect it to be used for windows, but in case something else comes up.
And by maintenance, we really mean not repairs, because debt service cannot be used for repairs of items. So these would really be replacements of things to maintain the building as a whole. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
All right. I think we have a plan to adopt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
And I know it's not on the agenda, but the chief is here, and I was hoping, Chief, you could just make a few comments and give us an update on dispatch services.
Sure.
Thank you.
Real briefly, obviously, as most people know, the town has entered into an agreement to take over as the primary answering point for incoming 911 calls within the town of East Hampton. Additionally, we have also contracted with Sag Harbor Fire and EMS, as well as Springs Fire and EMS, to become their primary dispatch center as well. There was some stories floating around about a delay in this process, which was handled by Verizon and Motorola and the county, which caused this to be pushed back a few weeks. Originally slated for January 5th, it went into effect on Monday, January 26th for the 911. And then the fire and EMS dispatching went into effect midnight, February 1st. Just a quick recap from our dispatch supervisors and from my senior staff. On Monday, the county and Verizon began the actual technical process around 9:15 and completed that by 12:30 p.m. During that time, there were numerous test 911 calls that were put through, and they were all successfully routed. This is all routed through the main Verizon hubs and the county in Western Suffolk County before being pushed out here through their process. The county and Motorola have been in touch with dispatch supervisors during the past week, and we have no issues to report. Mike Postel, who is the county 911 coordinator from the county, has been a tremendous help to us throughout this entire process. Chief Dispatcher Blanchard has been working with our CAD, which is our computer aided dispatch software vendor, CSI, daily, and putting an immense amount of work into ensure the updated CAD system was up and running prior to this takeover. Steve and Eddie Schnell, our communications technician, have been in continual contact with Springs and Sag Harbor fire chiefs to ensure a smooth transition. Additionally, Chief Blanchard has been in touch with the head dispatcher at East Hampton Village, PJ Cantwell, on an almost daily basis to cover all of the necessary transitionary points and keep in touch through this process. All of our dispatchers have been trained in what's called Pro QA, which is the automated question and answer process that is part of their training for receiving medical emergency calls through 911. We have actually been utilizing an AI simulator, so they're fully prepared when this full transition occurs. Pro QA is not fully up and running online right now in our system because of some integration issues with the vendor, but we're using what's called the card system, which is the exact same thing, just in a flip card for the number of questions that need to be answered. Fortunately, this time of year, it's not too busy. We don't have a high volume of calls, and it's giving them some hands-on experience in being able to use the flip cards until such time it drops down in the menus and they can use it on the screen in the next 2-3 weeks. We anticipate that being done. Deputy Chief Dispatchers Graham and Dodge have been completing the EMDQ and AQUA software training this past week, which enabled them to properly evaluate each public safety dispatcher on their use of the EMD card sets and Pro Q&A. So there's a layer of oversight and supervision that our chief and deputy chief supervisors will continuously and ongoing evaluate the performance and development of our dispatchers as they continue to use the system. As of noon yesterday, we had several EMS calls for Springs, a fire chief investigation, and 2 EMS calls for Sag Harbor. Both Sag Harbor EMS calls came in via a transfer from Southampton Town PD because of the nature of how Southampton Village is delineated. There are portions of Southampton Town that filter in Sag Harbor Village. Those calls get routed into Sag Harbor Village, Southampton Village, and transferred to us. That's the way it's always been with routing. And, you know, these directed transfers between municipalities have been ongoing for many years, and it was fully seamless. There were no issues at all. We've had several more calls in the meantime since yesterday. There's been no issues. Everything has gone smoothly. All EMS calls that were given to us have been vetted through the Pro QA process, and we've had several more calls that we've been able to dispatch for that incident. We've had a total of 90 911 calls, as I said, with 2 transfers from Southampton Town and about 29 from East Hampton Village that have come through. All the dispatchers are doing very well with the transition. They are embracing the changes that are occurring and asking a lot of questions of the supervisory staff, and we will be there for whatever is needed for them through this time and period. We offer a lot of support and assistance for all of our staff through any kind of change like this. Obviously, there was always a little bit of hesitancy with the initial changeover. It's gone very smoothly. Everyone's settling in and is very comfortable with what they're doing. An interesting note to that is of our 17 current members, 9 are either current or former fire and EMS volunteers, and 2 others have worked on the fire and EMS dispatch side previously before joining us. So there's a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge with how fire and EMS calls get dispatched, what the 911 cadence is, and what the expectations are of the fire and EMS workers who are out on the radio during these calls. Additionally, our radio room renovation project is just a couple weeks behind schedule. It's nearing completion. They are putting in, they've already done drywall. They're already, everything's been wired. We're getting down towards those finishing touches, which can always take a little while. Finishing touches always take the longest to get everything done, but we're anticipating towards the end of the month that being completed and us being pushed in there. And we have full plan in place to set up that transfer from our current temporary room back into there, where we leave 2 stations up and running while the transfer goes through, and then push the transfer through on the technical side with the phone lines, and then not decommission, but let the other 2 stations be monitored and used for a while until such time that the full transition is complete. And we appreciate the board's support. You know, we've had a lot of really positive conversations with members of the fire departments, and you know, our people are embracing the change and the new challenges, and things are going well. So.
Great. Any questions for the chief?
Chief, just to clarify, are all the open positions now filled for dispatchers?
We have 1 position we're looking to fill right now.
Right,
it's not vacant, it's an additional post for this year.
Right. Well, we also just had 1 retirement.
Yes. So we will be hiring 2. We called for the civil service list from the county, which just came out in late December. We're going through the vetting and screening process right now, the testing. We hope to have some candidates to interview in the next few weeks. Right. Hopefully that'll all tie in together at the same time. We can get their training out of the way before the summer season. It'd be great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
All right.
I just want to say thank you and your team for the professionalism and the way that you've handled this transition. There were no words to say how important this is for the community. So I won't try to articulate the importance of a 911 system, but I just want to thank you. And if you would telegraph that to your team for the professionalism through this whole transition.
Thank you. And they know how much support we have from the town and the board at this point. I appreciate that. And just so everyone else knows too, we have our senior staff members, the 4 lieutenants, the captain, myself. We're making regular visits to sit in and dispatch, observe operations, listening to the radio. We meet with at least one of the dispatch supervisors daily to go over everything. And there's a constant holistic review of how everything's going and how this whole process plays out by the whole department staff. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
Chief.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so now we are going to move on to the discussion of the East Hampton Town Airport, and I just wanted to make a few comments before we got into the presentation. So the town, as proprietor and operator of the airport, is committed to operating a safe and properly maintained facility without cost to taxpayers. That means we need to ensure that we conduct ongoing maintenance and invest in improvements to keep our airport safe. It also means we need to ensure that our revenues are sufficient to pay for those projects. At the same time, the town is equally invested in making the airport environmentally sustainable and compatible with our community. That means exploring and investing in new technologies. It also means better understanding of the current impacts on our community. I've asked our airport director, Jim Brundage, our outside counsel, Katie Van Hoeven from Kaplan Kirsch, and Nick Regano from Regano LLC to present today on some next steps for the airport. As you will hear in the presentation, there are a series of needed improvement projects here at East Hampton Town Airport. The town will need to issue bonds to cover those costs. In order to cover the costs of the increased debt service, I am recommending that the town increase landing fees by 15% and fuel flowage fees by 2 cents per gallon. As you will hear in the presentation, the proposed increases are designed to provide the airport with necessary revenue to implement the immediate improvement needs. I also recommend that the town revisit the airport financials in a year to assess whether additional adjustments are necessary to keep the airport self-sustaining. Our presenters will also talk about future steps to ensure that the airport remains environmentally sustainable and compatible with our community. And I look forward to a robust discussion either after or during the presentation, whatever makes the most sense. So Patrick, if you could please pull up the PowerPoint. And Katie, I think you're going to lead us off, correct? Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Supervisor, members of the Town Council. My name is Katie Van Hoeven. I'm outside counsel for the town from Kaplan Kirsch, and joining me today in this presentation will be Jim Brundage, your airport director, and also Nick Regano from Regano LLC. Next slide, please. I wanted to start by reiterating the points that the supervisor just made about the town's goals for the airport, because I think they set the stage for this presentation. So first and foremost, if you are going to own and operate an airport, it's critical that you invest in making sure that that airport is operated in a safe and efficient manner. And that means expending costs to keep the airport up to date. So that brings us to the second point, which is ensuring that the airport remains financially self-sustaining. And that's critical to make sure that the airport can consistently pay for itself so that it does not become a burden on your taxpaying citizens. Right now, the airport operates as part of a financial unit in and of itself. The revenues that are earned on the airport are expended on the airport, and the general fund does not contribute or support financially to keep the airport operating. And last, and it's been quoted already today by some of the commenters, is the critical interest in maintaining and maximizing opportunities to make the airport environmentally sustainable and compatible with neighboring opportunities. And we'll end our presentation with some opportunities in that front. So next slide. I wanted to start off with the concept of what it takes to operate a safe and efficient airport. And I wanted to start by looking backwards for what's been happening over the last 10 years just to set the stage. So if you look in the last 10 years, and I've listed the projects here, which I won't bother rereading to you, but the town's airport fund has spent about $6 million in the last 10 years to reconstruct and replace and repair existing technology, and also to invest in new technology in the airport. But of course, as anybody who owns a house knows, these costs aren't static. There's sort of always something new, and you always need to be paying attention to what's going on. So I want to turn it over to Airport Director Jim Brundage at this point, and go ahead to the next slide, to talk to you about the needs that he's identified for calendar year 2026 and beyond.
Welcome, Jim.
Thank you. So my comments are meant to provide some background for these proposed.
If you could talk into the
I'm sorry.
microphone so that LTV can pick it up.
Sure. My comments are meant to provide some background for these proposed improvements and capital expenditures. So the first one is airport emergency generator. Power outages at the airport can disrupt safe operations. Providing backup power can allow the airport to continue functioning safely during those outages. If the power outage is long-term, as we know, we just heard about Tennessee, where half the residents are still without power. Could have happened here. If it is long-term, the airport generator can also provide emergency relief to local residents.
So you want to do it one project at a time? I think that might make the most sense. So this is a project that we've actually already funded for the engineering. We did that. We did a resolution back in May of 2025. And I just wanted, the generator would connect to the fuel farm and it would connect to the main terminal, correct?
Well, not exactly.
Okay.
Main terminal, all the runway lights, signs, that wind, weather station, radios, all that. But part of this improvement involves putting a connector up on the fuel farm that can accept a portable generator. And I've been confirmed that we have plenty of portable generators for that use.
Right. And this is a natural gas. The reason that this got, authorized for engineering back in May of 2025, there's been a lot of back and forth with National Grid, as I understand it. And I think we're finally getting close to getting in a estimate. They've given us a verbal estimate. They just haven't put it in writing what the cost is going to be.
Correct.
To connect to natural gas.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking through these, look, for me, this is such a high priority. This is part of our critical infrastructure. I look at this through the emergency preparedness lens. I look at it through my role in EMS, doing medevacs from here. Yeah. You can't have the lights out on the runway. This has to be a functional center for the town at all times. And so having this emergency generator is critical for me.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm on board. I think that in just the idea of what types of improvements that you're looking to make, Jim, from the first line all the way down to the last line, all of these improvements are specifically for one reason, and that's safety. And I don't think we can compromise safety for any reason. I think I couldn't certainly make compromises in safety in any of our properties. And as we fund the police department for safety and all the other things we're talking about in capital improvements, this specific list for me is all about safety.
I agree with the previous comments, and I'm fully supportive of the generator.
Okay, great. So next is painting of airport equipment. There are 4 pieces of equipment that this refers to. First is a rotating beacon. It's an alternating green and white light beam that is atop a 30-foot high tower and is lit up during periods of low ceilings and nighttime operations. And it actually tells pilots that are flying anywhere through the area where airports are. If they need to divert or have an emergency landing, they can spot those rotating beacons. If the beacon is green and white, alternating green and white light, it's a municipal airport. If it's green and 2 whites, it's a military airport. So it actually, besides
because I love that one. It's like lighthouses. Lighthouses are you either have a foghorn, either have the light that goes every 17 seconds, or the color on it.
Yeah.
What is that again? What is that nuance?
Oh, green and white are municipal airports, and green and 2 white is a military airport.
Yeah, there's good trivia. Good.
So so besides telling the pilot where it is and what type of airport it is, it also indicates to the pilot weather conditions. If the weather is below 1,000 feet and 3 miles visibility, the light comes on during the day. So that's the rotating beacon. Another piece of equipment that needs painting and repair is a segmented circle, which is a metal circle on the ground that are painted in white and yellow FAA colors that shows the pilot where the windsock and the wind tee are. So the windsock provides visual indication of wind direction, and the wind tee is a triangular shaped device that always points in the direction of the runway in use. So we don't have a tower year round. So these are devices that the pilot uses to indicate wind direction and landing direction or takeoff direction. All of these devices are required to be painted in FAA-approved orange and white colors, and they've all faded over time, and the paint is also necessary for corrosion protection. So they're important devices. Next is fuel farm control panel.
Yeah.
Yep, that's on there.
The aviation fuel tanks were installed in 2017. A few weeks ago, we were unable to start the pumps. The source of the problem was inside the main control panel. Water had been seeping in, causing corrosion on some wires and connectors, and the electricians were able to get the pumps running. But the corrosion is such that the entire panel needs replacing. So we're engineering for that right now. Repave and repaint 2 runways.
Can I just say, with that one, we're also looking to put some kind of structure over so that that issue with the water getting in won't occur again.
Right, it's keep it out of the
And
elements.
that is estimated at a $200,000 expense.
Yeah. Repave and repaint runways 1634 and 1028. So the main runway is labeled 1028, and for those you don't know, runway labels are compass headings. So 28 is 280 westbound, and 110 is 100, which is 180 degrees out. So that's eastbound. The main runway is.
I've been here 9 years, man, and this stuff's sort of fun to me. I apologize. I mean, it just makes sense, Jim. And same thing with the presentation about public safety, as Councilmember Rogers says on this. A lot of this just makes sense.
Well, when a pilot is lined up with runway 28, he should see 280 on his compass.
It just makes sense. Yeah.
So that runway is in satisfactory. It's the main runway. It's in satisfactory condition, having undergone a major crack repair in 2011. Those repairs consisted of saw cutting wide stripes of failed pavement. Those saw cuts were 3 or 4 feet wide. And then filling them in with new pavement. Those repairs have settled over time, which have resulted in an uneven surface. The improvement calls for smoothing out the old repairs and repainting the runway with required FAA markings. So the runway is in basically decent shape, but except for these repairs, old repairs.
So that's a $534,000. That's the estimated cost to maintain and do the crack repair and paint the main runway 1028.
So the secondary runway 1634 crosses over the main runway and is meant for lighter aircraft to be able to utilize it for if the main runway has a strong crosswind. It's primarily used for lighter single-engine aircraft that are more greatly affected by crosswinds and need to take off and land more aligned with the wind. This runway has undergone crack repairs several times over the years, but now needs to be completely milled out and repaved. So that's a much greater expense.
And that's estimated at $2.7 million.
Lastly, it's the siting and engineering of an upgraded air traffic control tower. Seasonal control tower at the East Hampton Airport is a necessity because of not only the volume of traffic during the season, but also the diverse type of aircraft that operate here. Jets, helicopters, seaplanes, light single engine and twin engine aircraft, all of which have incompatible performance characteristics. So I recognized the need for a control tower early on when I got here. In 2011, the town authorized a trial run with a temporary tower. The trial run proved to be successful and added a large measure of safety. That temporary tower is still in place, and although effective, has some drawbacks. It is very old and difficult to maintain. Also, it is not high enough for the controllers to see over the trees to the south. They have to rely on radar and pilot reporting to see traffic south of the airport. Also, the temporary tower lease costs the town over $50,000 a year. So we, besides the cost of maintaining it, we have to pay to lease it. The town engineers are proposing a siting, an engineering study for an improved control tower that the town would own.
And that this is a multi-year process, right? Because there's a lot of study that goes in that the FAA requires, which is why we're asking for a siting.
FAA and the state.
And, okay.
New York State.
So this is the cost for siting and engineering in 2026 is roughly $650,000. But all told, we were looking at an estimate about 6.5 million for a new tower or reconstructed tower. Okay. Do board members have questions for Jim?
No, look, I understand everything I believe that you're looking to do. I've been on site for 2 plane crashes in EMS, and like crosswinds have been the cause. So I fully appreciate the need to upgrade this runway. I think it's critical to give that safety option to the smaller the vehicles out there as well. And you know, with the tower itself, you know, I think that's good long-term planning, bluntly.
So I completely agree with the Councilmember Flight. A lot of this is an ounce of prevention before you have to put in large capital investments into it. You're seeing that, as you're saying, the painting. How much is the light tower replacement right now? Hundreds of thousands of dollars. So corrosion, as you're talking about, and we're in a very salt weather dependent location out here. It makes sense on there. Again, with public safety on there, we know from the capital discussion what Steve Lynch said, what it costs of paint striping on just our highways. It's even more specific when it comes to landing strips also, and you have to mill that out. Those costs are reasonable, I think, then too. As far as when it comes to repaving and painting of the runway, that's been a long-term discussion that the town board has discussed, and I've supported it then, I'll support it now also. Great.
Yeah, as I said before, I actually think this list that you're presenting for capital projects, even though the numbers are large in the world, I think it's a conservative list of safety improvements, and there is not one amenity improvement in this list whatsoever, which is very important for me. So we're not building, VIP rooms or expanding any type of amenity at the airport. Everything that's on this list is critical for airport safety.
Yeah.
And I don't think those are negotiable, actually, in terms of any, something that one of the callers said today. I don't think this safety improvements and maintenance of safe facilities is something that should be negotiated.
Yeah, I agree with the previous comments. Jim, you were nice enough to show me around the airport over a year ago now, and I think all these things, except for the fuel farm, were on your mind, on your radar then. And as Kate and everybody else has said, these are safety improvements, and I think while we have an airport that's in use, it's paramount that we take safety seriously, so I'm fully supportive.
Can I just ask 2 questions on there? Site security is always one, and that comes down to the fencing. There was large fencing that was installed, perimeter fencing. Is that, is there any need repairs of that fencing from deer intrusion, pine beetle trees? Is that something?
That's an ongoing process, and I did budget for that. Probably not enough because of the number of trees that are involved, but some of it is being repaired in-house with our people.
Okay.
But while you're on the subject of fencing and security, we actually have a project that's been funded already. It's not a large amount to change the codes on the gates, because we did have a airport and we call it cruision.
Sure. Yeah.
So somebody that was unauthorized got onto the airport. So we're changing all the codes, and then we're also going to talk about ways to improve security.
But I'm fully supportive of that also then too.
That's in a discussion tomorrow actually with Steve Tuma from Sound and Ed Michaels.
Thank you very much for addressing that. I appreciate it.
Jim, just following up with that, I might have the land management team reach out to you. Just so we're looking at other projects in the town using external contractors to manage, some of these trees that do prevent hazards. So, if we're doing one, it might be worth including that in the scope we're looking at.
Great.
So,
okay, we'll talk.
All right.
That's it.
Thank you,
Thank
Jim.
you.
Right, Katie, if you want to pick it up on slide 5?
Sure. So Jim's given you an overview of the projects that have been identified as necessary projects for the airport, necessary safety projects, as Councilwoman Rogers stated. And I wanted to put that in a little bit of context. So this slide is a backwards-looking snapshot at the airport finances over the last 10 years. And I think it's not important in terms of a line-by-line analysis of this year this happened and that year that happened, but it's important to look at it as sort of a set of trends, because airports are fluid environments. Some years you may have terrific revenues. Maybe you sold a property and so the balance on your revenue sheet goes up. And other years you have significant expenses, and that's just the nature of operating an airport. But the really important part of this column is watching the health of the airport fund balance. And airports across the country need to keep healthy reserves in order to be able to respond in the immediate to unknown circumstances. And so you'll see that most airports across the country keep a reserve of at least sort of, 1 year's worth of total operating expenses just for emergency conditions. But airports can plan going forward when they know that expenses are coming up. And so let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So you just heard from Jim about the improvement costs that he's identified for 2026 alone, and they total over $4.5 million. If we looked at the previous slide, your annual expenditures are around $7 million. Your revenue fund balance is around $7 million right now. Obviously, the airport's not going to use the cash in your fund to immediately pay for those, and the town's going to need to bond to cover the costs of these safety-based improvements. But that's a significant amount of debt service, on the order of probably more than $250,000 a year. And that debt service for new bonds for these projects would be added to existing debt service that the airport is already paying for previous bonds, for previous improvement expenditures. So let's go ahead to the next slide. To be a reasonable operator, to prepare for these costs, to ensure that the airport continues to be self-sustaining, the two sort of logical places to look for increasing revenue to cover those costs are looking at landing fees and fuel flowage fees. And so I wanted to quickly talk about each of those two types of fees. So landing fees, the town's current landing fees are assessed based on weight categories. They're graduated. The lighter the aircraft, the lower the fee. I think there are about 6 or possibly 7 different categories of weight, and aircraft are assessed based on those weight categories. And I think it's really important to pay attention to the fact that the current fee structure that you are applying has been in place for 10 years. It was last adopted in June of 2016. And in that time, in that decade that has passed since the town last addressed landing fees, the CPI for this region has increased by almost 33%. The other thing that I think is really noticeable is that prior to the most recent increase a decade ago, the town regularly reviewed landing fees and readdressed them to tackle ongoing financing issues for the airport. So the town increased landing fees in 2006, 2008, 2013, 2014, and then most recently in 2016. And those two facts to me say it is entirely reasonable to revisit the landing fee structure at this point, given the increases in CPI, given the expenses that are coming for this airport that are documented to be needed for safety reasons, and given that they haven't been revisited in a decade. And fuel flowage fees are sort of another logical place to look to for revenue increases. And in fact, this one has been in place for a little bit longer. The last time the town increased fuel flowage fees for the airport was in July 2014. At that point, the town raised the fuel flowage fee from 15 cents a gallon to 30 cents a gallon. And that's a little bit longer period than the landing fee increase. So the CPI in the time between the last fuel flowage fee increase to now is 34.29%. So again, reasonable to start considering increases to these two categories of fees at this point in 2026. So the other thing that I wanted to look at was to say, are these reasonable? How do we assess whether your prior landing fees were reasonable and whether proposing increases remain reasonable? And I think it's really interesting to look at the review that FAA did of the town's previous increases. And at the time, there was an administrative legal challenge to the reasonableness of the town's increasing fees, both landing fees and fuel flowage fees. And I think it's really important for the town board to understand that in that litigation, FAA reviewed the structure of the town's current landing fees, that weight-based graduated system, and FAA reiterated that this is a widely accepted metric. It's an incredibly reasonable way of assessing landing fees. But more importantly, when the FAA reviewed the previous structures that were adopted in 2014 and in 2016, at that time, FAA very clearly concluded that those were reasonable, they were not excessive, not unjustly discriminatory, and that those fees did not result in an excessive surplus relative to projected expenditures. And if you fast forward, I think that logic still applies today. We've seen the CPI increase, we've seen costs increase, and the town is facing the similar question now about whether it's reasonable to increase fees, and I think the analysis is the same. So if we can go to the next slide, the supervisor asked for our assistance in looking at what different types of increases would look like. And again, this is sort of flexible. It's hard to predict in the future because obviously these fees depend on how many landings occur at the airport, and how many gallons of fuel are sold. And, you know, we can all look into a crystal ball and try and guess what's going to happen next year. But the best indicator is really what's happened over the last couple of years. So I have the data from 21 to 2025 here. And just a quick note, the caveat on the 2025 data says year to date. As Becky has told you, the numbers aren't totally final now. She has assured me that the 2025 numbers are near final, so these are close, but I want to just reiterate.
We haven't done the audit yet.
They're not perfect yet. But you can make some guesses about the value of a 15% increase for landing fees versus a 20% increase versus a 25% increase, and the same thing for what it would mean to add everything between a cent increase for the fuel flowage fee all the way up to a nickel increase per gallon. And as you'll hear, and let's go ahead and move to the next slide, the action that the supervisor is recommending is a combination of the two: an increase of the fuel flowage fee, an increase of the landing fee by 15%, and an increase of the fuel flowage fee by 2 cents a gallon. And if you run the math, that should generate an estimated $350,000 in additional revenue for a year's worth of operations. My understanding, Madam Supervisor, is that the intent would be that the vote on this increase would occur in mid-March. I think there is a meeting on the 17th of March.
Yeah, so we have a work session on the 17th, and we could vote on it on the 19th. So just so folks know, I've reached out to the FBO, to Steve Tuma Sound, and let him know what our plans were. I also spoke to Jeff Smith at Eastern Region Helicopter Council, Alex Gersten at NBAA, which is one of the trade organizations for airports, spoke to the East Hampton Community Alliance and representative from the East Hampton Aviation Association to let everyone know that this presentation was happening today, what we were proposing. I think we just, Aaron Sweeney from EHCA mentioned it. We have always exempted locally based aircraft from the landing fee schedule. That would continue with this recommendation. And I just, because I was the liaison back in 2014 and 2016 to the airport, there could be feedback coming. We could get letters from the different organizations and users of the airport. So I wanted some time to elapse to be able to give folks, if they want to reach out to us, if they've got questions, concerns, folks in the noise affected communities want to reach out. this gives us time to, let people participate, let us know what their thoughts are on it. And then we could, if we need to, bring it back for a work session on March 17th, or we could go straight to a vote on March 19th.
And again, the intent, Madam Supervisor, I think, is that the rates would go into effect at the beginning of this sort of summer season on May 1, correct? Okay.
Right. So everyone has plenty of notice that that this rate change would go into effect.
And again, just to sum up, this is sort of titrated to make sure that the types of increases that these fee increases would generate are really tied to the proposed expenditures that we just heard the airport director talk about. So moving to the next slide.
So I just have
yes,
some questions.
absolutely.
If I can also say, I also met with the members of the Wayne-Scott CAC Airport Subcommittee too, and took them through this proposal.
Yeah, I just have a question on how we landed on 15% and 2% for the fuel. 2 cents. 2 cents with all the numbers that you have in relation to what the costs are going to be. So this will, at 15% and at 2 cents, will generate about $350,000 in increased revenue. Mm-hmm. However, looking at improvements that are much higher than that. So I was.
So we looked at so obviously the different projects are going to have different PPUs, periods of probable usefulness. But what we were looking at, what's the debt service that $4.6 million would trigger? Mm-hmm. And then we wanted to have, adjust the levers to get to the sweet spot where we're not looking to build a surplus. We're looking to cover the debt service on 4.6, and felt that 15% increase in landing fees and a 2-cent increase, which is about 7% increase in fuel flowage fee at $350,000 should cover the debt service. And that's why we also, and as Katie demonstrated, in past years, we had, we looked at the fees more regularly. Mm-hmm. And we will, because if we do move forward with the, upgrading the air traffic control tower at a $6.5 million cost, but I think that includes $650,000 for engineering. That's going to be another spike. And so we are going to have to come back possibly, this time next year and be doing the same analysis and seeing if we need to do another increase to landing fees.
Thank you.
I think one additional point to your question, Councilwoman, is, why look at both as opposed to just tweaking one or the other? And I think one of the things that the supervisor considered was, and as she just mentioned, locally based aircraft are currently exempt from landing fees altogether. And that's a reasonable setup because they pay into the airport system in different ways through leases and so on and so forth. And so a landing fee increase has zero effect on a locally based aircraft. And there's a point at which if everyone is benefiting from this, it's important to make sure that, all the beneficiaries are paying in. And so the additional smaller but increase on fuel flowage fees brings the locally based aircraft into sort of the solution for keeping a safe aircraft, and has them contributing some amount as well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So our next slide, is tiny and has a lot of numbers, but what I wanted to do was make sure that anyone who wanted to understand what is the actual impact of these landing fee increase, the fuel flow fee increase is sort of logical. Every time you buy a gallon of gas, it's going to be 2 cents more. It's a little bit harder to comprehend what the meaning of the 15% increase is. So very briefly, at the top row, we have the weight categories, all from the lightest category of 0 to 4,500 pounds to the highest category of over 50,000 pounds. And then the next row is the current landing fee that's assessed in each of those categories. And then in green is the dollar amount of the increase that this 15% increase would incur in each of those categories. So you see for the lightest aircraft, it's a $3 increase from a $20 fee to a $23 fee. And then all the way at the right hand, the aircraft that weigh more than 50,000 pounds, maximum takeoff weight, currently pay $700 per landing, and their fee would increase to $805, which is a $105 increase. This chart is also broken out to show of the data from last year's landing, again, our best sort of data set to look at, how many of the aircraft in each of these categories are exempt and don't pay fees at all? How many are being assessed different categories of increases? And what I've done in the next slide, if you can go ahead and advance, is try and distill some of what I think the key takeaway points are. So first and foremost, if you look at your 2025 landing data, 24%, almost a quarter of the landings at the East Hampton Town Airport are exempt from landing fees. That means almost a quarter of landings would not be affected at all from a landing fee increase.
Because they're based at the airport.
Because they're based at the
They're
airport. And they're local, exactly. And then if you start adding in, okay, who is the next group that's going to be impacted? It would be the aircraft that are in that lowest weight category. So if you now look at the category of people who either pay nothing and wouldn't have an increase at all, or the category of aircraft that are operating in that lowest weight category and would have a $3 increase, that's 32% of operations at the airport would have a $3 or less increase. And the math goes up. 44% of operations would have a $15 or less increase, and 61% of operations would have a $25 or less increase for landing fees. For me, that was the easiest way to distill sort of all the scary math of the preceding slide, but I wanted to stop and see if there are any additional questions on that.
No.
All right.
It's not scary. Mrs. Walter, my math teacher, would be very happy.
And as as Supervisor Burke Gonzalez mentioned, this isn't static. This is designed to address the immediate needs that have been identified, but there are ongoing needs. The air traffic control tower project is one we've already talked about that is going to have continuing costs. And it's sort of necessary and prudent to revisit the finances of the airport every year to see, do these increases work? Will they work for 2027? Will they work for 2028? When is the time to revisit them? And so my understanding, Madam Supervisor, is that you intend to revisit this in the first quarter of 2027 to see if the financing is still working or if additional tweaks need to be made. So I want to switch to the next slide, but before we move sort of off of landing fee and fuel flowage fee increases, are there any other questions about that before we move to sort of the third prong of the town goals? Great. So as was mentioned, Madam Supervisor, in your opening statement, one of the other really critical town goals here is to look for opportunities to maximize environmentally sustainable technologies that can be put into play at the airport and ways to keep the airport compatible with your neighbors, with your constituents. Two of the things that the supervisor has been thinking about that will also be interesting opportunities for this airport deal with new and emerging environmentally sustainable technologies. The first is the role that sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, can play at this town airport. Airports across the country are starting to deliver mixed blends that include SAF. I think Teterboro is delivering a mixed blend that has 25% SAF. As the town explores opportunities to add fuel tanks, one of the things the town can do is look to make sure that bidders have the capability of delivering SAF fuels to the airport, and that is one way that the airport can take steps to move forward as an environmentally sustainable entity and reduce a carbon footprint.
If I could just say, so in 2017, Jim had mentioned we installed the new fuel farm. We have 3 fuel tanks there. We have room for a 4th fuel tank where we could have just that tank be SAF, the sustainable aviation fuel. And that is something we would look at for 2027, because obviously we would need to engineer it and whatnot, but it's something that the folks that I spoke to, everybody was on board with, and I know Jim supports.
Yeah, so when you say study, we're really talking about engineering, because you're looking at the fourth tank.
So, Madam Supervisor, would the 200,000 we've got for the corrosion project, would that cover any engineering costs we might incur this
that's
year?
separate.
Okay.
And just to clarify, there are limits on the percentage of SAF that you can have in a blend right now. I think the federal regulatory limit is 50%. I think most airports that are delivering SAF blends, the maximum that's happening at airports right now is around 25%. Obviously, as the industry and technology evolve and safety studies give regulators more comfort with different blends, airports will be able to respond in kind, but right now the delivery is a blended mix that has SAF and traditional aviation fuels. The second opportunity that the town has relates to infrastructure, electric infrastructure to support emerging technologies for electric aircraft. This is not readily available on the market right now. There are what we call eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing. It's a helicopter that's electric, but of course it has an acronym. There's at least one fixed wing aircraft that is now certified, but it's really not happening at a commercial level. A lot of that stuff is happening at the test level right now. But the lead time to be able to support this new emerging technology is significant. I think the town of East Hampton, like many communities, throughout the country, are facing incredible demands on their grid, and the amount of time to figure out how to be able to support the type of transmitter capacity to support the incredible electric demand of being able to serve this fleet is going to take a lot of time. And a lot of the equipment is going to take a lot of time and be back ordered. So if there is interest among the town to be among the leaders in this sort of technology, the time is now to start having those conversations with PSE&G about how you would be able to support that load, how you'd be able to support it in the context of the additional load that you just have as a community. And likely the two loads are going to hit at the same time in your summer peak hours at the aviation, when your aviation activity is the strongest, and probably your demands on the power grid are the strongest for this community too. So starting those conversations early, if that's of interest, the time is now to start thinking about that. I wanted to switch there and say the other sort of key effort that is already underway is an analysis of aircraft operations and complaints. The town has already authorized a study by HMMH to look back over the last 5 years to analyze operations and complaint data and to correlate the two. And my understanding is, Madam Supervisor, that you expect a report from HMMH to the town in the spring of this year.
I'm hoping it's the third work session in April. That's what we're targeting.
And this is really important because a lot of things have changed in the past couple of years, and it's really critical for the town. If you're going to address noise concerns, and you've heard from your constituents that they are worried about noise concerns, you need to understand where your pain points are. You need to understand what the problem is. And to do that, you need to look at your current data. And so one of the things that the HMMH analysis will do is give you the most current data for what's out there. And one of the things I think that will be the most interesting to understand is, in the last 5 years, your airport director, Jim Brundage, was just telling me he switched the voluntary curfew hours that used to be from 11 to 7. They're now 10 to 7. And it will be really interesting to see what the compliance is. How effective were those voluntary measures? What did non-compliance look like? Can we distill any sort of explanations for what's going on there? And that's the kind of data that I think the town board will need to make decisions going forward on what opportunities are available.
Because we did this exercise, if you want to call it that, back in 2014, 2015, when we dove in and we defined the problem. Now we need to see, that's a dozen years ago.
Yeah.
And
things are different.
Where are we today?
Yeah.
We'd be able to also then have a discussion on the suggestion from the Wayne Scott Citizens Advisory Committee subcommittee on the airport for noise monitoring devices?
I think that will be really critical. I think you need to understand the scope of your problem to figure out.
For this, yeah. So this is step one.
Step one is looking at who came, where were they, what complaints did they generate, and how can we sort of better distill your problem statement out of that. I think that would help you refine either looking at additional studies or taking steps forward rather than just having a scattershot approach of, let's just put a bunch of noise monitors everywhere. This gives you a more targeted approach for understanding what your problem is.
Thank you.
I support that. I think I said at the start of the discussion with regards to generator, this is critical infrastructure. And what I mean by that is it has to serve the community. And this report to me is critical because it, as you point out, it calls out the pain points.
Yeah.
And those are areas we can improve on to ensure that net, we are still having a net positive impact on our community with this. So I think this is critical.
Exactly. So now I'm going to turn to Nick to give you a briefing on the updates to the Town Code Chapter 75. But before I step off the lectern,
I just want to, for at this juncture, is the board supportive of the recommendation to increase landing fees 15% and fuel flowage fee 2 cents?
I do. I think that they're both reasonable, particularly based on the timeframe, and it will cover the debt service and the costs for the capital improvements for public safety. If I could add one more into as far as the future measures on there, knowing how long it takes projects to become from conception to actual installation on there, I wouldn't mind looking at, I think if Tom was trying to get to maybe about additional fuel container for the SAF. I wouldn't mind potentially finding out what that cost of engineering would be to put out now. Also knowing that that might not be installed till 28.
Right.
You know, I look at the long on there. I don't know if I'll be here in 28, but I would hope that SAF is.
Yeah.
And the same thing going with the EV infrastructure, to have them immediately start having that conversation with PSE&G, finding out what they would need. Is there proprietary needs for developers or the companies that would be using that, and how we can collaborate and work together? Because that emerging technology is also emerging at the same time of great need for electrical demand on these things.
And we've already had a couple of prototypes that were certified to come and give demonstrations at the airport. So while this isn't happening tomorrow, it is happening, and I support planning in advance so that we're not waiting for the airplane to be brought into service on a commercial level or a private level. We're there already. And I think that's going to be important. I think all airports actually are going to probably look in this direction as well. As far as the fuel, the fees that we're talking about, since it's been 10 and 14 years, right, since we've looked at this, I think it's beyond timely that we ensure that we have a financially self-supporting airport, particularly now we have this list that we know is coming forth. And again, this isn't coming out of, and is not meant to come out of the taxpayer base. Yeah. It's meant to come out of the airport funding. So it's been quite a while. I wish my fees for gas and for home heating oil and plugging in my electric car have not gone up in those 10 years, but they have. So I think it's timely. I also support that number because we're going to be taking another look next year across the range of numbers. So knowing that this is for this season and then we take another look, I think is appropriate as well. So I support.
Yeah, I support the landing fee increase as well. It sounds like a lot, but it's not actually when you give the comparison to, the overall cost of living increase, CPI, since then. And I agree with Kate that we should look at this more frequently so it doesn't sound so shocking when in fact it's not even keeping up with the cost of things. It's also very important to me that the local pilots aren't affected because I've heard from, all sorts of opinions about different perspectives of the airport. Very few people, whatever they think about the airport, are complaining about the local pilots. And so I think that it's appropriate that they're not burdened by that increase. However, the 2 cent fuel flowing increase, I think, is appropriate for them to share some of the costs, again, in recognition of the increased expense of things, and it hasn't been increased in so long. So I'm fully supportive.
I would echo that largely. I mean, I think the one thing that does stand out is that a 2 cent increase is 7% versus the CPI of 32%. But our job is not to tax unnecessarily. Like, look, we're raising fees to meet the increased capital funding costs by leaving room to increase that potentially in the future. As we see future costs, that makes sense to me.
Okay, all right. If there are no more questions, I'm going to turn it over to Nick.
Great. Thank you, Katie.
You're welcome.
Welcome, Nick.
Oh, thank you, Katie. Hi, everybody. Madam Supervisor, council members. I'm here today to speak about one bullet in Katie's presentation, so it'll be super, super brief, I promise. But I do need to go down memory lane a little bit here. So
Patrick, you can take that down.
in January of 2022, February 2022, the town board passed resolutions to convert effectively the airport to private use by closing and reopening. In April of 2022, the town board actually adopted a resolution promulgating new rules for this private use airport. Those rules are still on the books today. In May of 2022, the airport, in fact, became private use, but was immediately enjoined by the Supreme Court. We now have rulings from the Supreme Court and the appellate division saying that those January and February resolutions that the town board passed, converting, and we're talking about 2022, converting effectively the airport to private use are enjoined. So since that time, the town has filed Form 7480-1 with FAA. The airport is now back to public use, but we have these private use airport code, right, on the books. And so we would recommend, don't think it's an extreme recommendation, to go back to Chapter 75 of the town code, which is the airport portion of the town code, in the manner it existed prior to the adoption of the current Chapter 75, which only applies to private use airport. That puts you back in the public use world. In addition, while the prior Chapter 75 had an actual landing fee schedule in it, that landing fee schedule as it existed in 2022 was old. As Katie mentioned, in 2026 was the last time landing fees were increased. Those increases were not actually put in the town code, they were adopted by resolution. So what we would recommend that the board considers is going back to effectively the world as it existed in 2022 with those prior landing fees, and then the board obviously could consider the landing fee increases that you heard today. In addition, because the town board, this is really just a clarification to the town code, because the town board in the past adopted landing fee increases by resolution, that language would be included in the updated, I'll call it updated, but really, renewed old Chapter 75. That's it. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them, but otherwise, I think it's a pretty innocuous recommendation.
And this requires us to go to public hearing because
Yes.
obviously we're amending the code, even though we're going back to the old code.
Yes, it does.
So I understand the need. I just have a question on 7534, penalties and offenses. It's not to exceed $250 per offense on there. Can that be changed?
So that could be looked at after this readoption as a subsequent amendment, if that's something the town board wants to look at for sure. But I think at this juncture, what the town board should consider is getting actual rules that make sense in the town code, and then we could talk about subsequently what rules need to be changed.
I understand that process. Okay, thank you.
I think that's good. I think that is going to public hearing is good. It gives the public an opportunity to see how they would like it regulated in that chapter too.
Okay.
So it's basically by order of the state Supreme Court.
That was my question.
So
Yes.
we would put this on, Jake, on Thursday to notice for public hearing and hear it March 5th.
Yes, and to be clear, this would be adopted effectively pursuant to the court's order. So you are
That was my
following.
question. I just wanted to clarify. It's
Yes.
not like we've decided ourselves to
Right.
do this. This is part of the court order.
Right. And the court order didn't expressly say that you needed to do this, but it's obvious as, he annulled the January and February resolutions, and the April resolution adopting this new town code was an outgrowth of those two resolutions. So it is necessary.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay. All right. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. So that's what we've got for East Hampton Town Airport. And now I know Scott's here. We are going to discuss the Osborne Homestead Draft Management Plan. I don't know, Ian, if there was anything you wanted to do an introduction or not.
I'll let Scott go over it first, and then if I
Okay.
can just speak after him.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm back. So we talked about this last November, so I'm basically going to give you the updated version of that original draft. So the town acquired this remarkable parcel at 66 Wainscott, Maine in December of '24. And the town board also dedicated this property as a John Osborne Homestead Historic Landmark in March of 2025. So again, I'm here to present the modifications to the original draft. At our review, let's see, we also reviewed written comments that were, after that meeting, we received written comments from the public. We received some from Sarah Davison, as well as the Wainscott Heritage Project. Always grateful to receive public comments because, you know, how do you know what you're missing unless somebody is bringing it to your attention? So after review of those two documents and after hearing the town board's comments with regard to some changes that they wanted to see, we then went back to the drawing board and made some modifications, and I'll go through those one by one. You'll note they're brightly highlighted. You can't miss them. So with the exception of typographical errors mostly pointed out by our supervisor, thank you. The changes are all in bright yellow. I'm just going to go through them one by one. I'll actually read them to you so you could see what the changes actually were. So on page 3, for example, we clarified the mission as per Wainscott Heritage Project. We basically, they basically did some revisions to our original document. This was the mission that they actually provided, and I liked it better than our original one, so we incorporated it. The John Osborne Homestead celebrates the legacy of the Osborne family through the preservation and interpretation of their historic Wainscott farmhouse, garage and residence, playhouse, and the homestead grounds, which represents the 19th century rural farming character of Wainscott. In addition to protection and stewardship of the historic structures, this acquisition recognizes the exceptional historic and ongoing scenic value of this site, and the perpetual protection of the scenic viewshed across the parcel is paramount. Let's see, the next one, also on page 3, we modified the scope of the management plan. Primarily, these are all clarity or adding additional information. They're not large changes, they just make what we already had a little bit more robust. So with regard to scope of management plan, this plan covers the 1904 Louisa Edwards Osborne House and garage and residence, the playhouse, and the remainder land beyond structures to Wainscott Pond. This plan and goals have been informed and influenced by the history of the Osbornes on Wainscott Pond, according to Hillary Osborne Malecki, found in the Appendix C, and the historic and architectural assessment of the Osborne Farm property by Steward Preservation Services, Appendix D. The next modification on page 4, the board asked, and we also felt it required a little bit more robust description of the site, and so we went on to make those modifications that read, the Osborne Homestead, located on Wainscott Main Street, is made up of 28 acres of flat topography with a bucolic viewshed to Wainscott Pond. There is defined landscape around the main house and garage residence, but the balance of the lands are currently in a natural meadow state with a combination of low woody vegetation and grasslands. The property contains native, non-native, and invasive plants. Full list on the attached Appendix E. As described in the history of the Osbornes on Wainscott Pond, according to Hillary Osborne Malecki, the Osborne family has been farming in Wainscott since 1675. In the 1930s through the 1980s, the crop was potatoes, followed by strawberries up until 1994. In recent decades, the land has remained fallow with intermittent mowing to keep the land clear of successional growth. For more information, see the attached architectural assessment of the Osborne Farm. Let's see, on page 6, sorry. The town reserving the right to have farmland on this property. I think it was important to the town board to point out specifically that if we do decide that, it would be in conjunction with the planning department and specific approvals by the town board. And on page 7, also at the discussion at work session, not having any farmers approach the board with regard to their ideas of what might be done there. The board was uncomfortable with limiting what might be proposed, and so we'll remove that sentence number 3 right there. And then just below that, the board also asked for a more robust description of what water quality improvement and public access might be. And so this is what we came up with here and proposing. This plan shall allow for various types of water quality improvement projects on a defined area of the property and or the water's edge as necessary and as part of a project approved by the East Hampton Town Board by resolution with the primary purpose of or resulting in a water quality improvement to Wainscott Pond. Approved projects may be implemented by the town through the Water Quality Improvement Program or by an outside entity granted funding through the Request for Applications Program. As the only public land with access to Wainscott Pond, the town board may grant access across its property to organizations or other government agencies, including the town trustees, on a case-by-case basis. The level of review and approvals by the board or other regulatory agencies, including any necessary permitting, will be predicated on the plan and the goals of the applicant. And I think that was the last modification. So again, we were seeking clarity, obviously correction of typos, and making the language a little bit more robust. But as you can see, as I scrolled through that, there weren't a lot of changes. We highlighted the ones we had. We provided it to the town board. We reviewed this again at our January 21st meeting of our property management committee, who was the group who actually formally proposed the original draft management plan. And so they had no further changes to this as presented. So unless the board has additional changes or corrections, I think it's time to schedule this.
Yeah, well, thank you, Scott. Thanks for all your work on this, and thanks to the Property Management Committee who helped, craft the original version and then also reviewed this revision last week, and we're supportive. I also want to thank the Wainscott Heritage Project and other members of Wainscott who have been involved in this process very early on. I think that was important to make sure that their comments were considered and often incorporated. And I think most recently the Wainscott Heritage Project improved the introduction to this and the history, and I think Scott agrees. It makes it more robust, and there was an emphasis added to the view shed, which was always the intention. But I know that's where some of the friction comes from on the nuances of other places where we didn't choose to use their language. But I think it's important to note that that's been added, the view shed, as one of the primary aspects of this property. Just to go through a few details, I know that there's been a talk about designating this property as historic. I believe that this management plan is consistent with doing that, as opposed to just individual structures, but the whole property. I don't think there's anything in here that prohibits that, and just wanted to point that out. I also do want to note that deer fence was a common part of the conversation, both from the committee and the members of the public that I've spoken to. I believe, and just to speak frankly about that, I think most people don't support a deer fence being put up, and I personally don't disagree with that. But I want to say that as long as we're going to be open to active agriculture, I think we have to be consistent and leave important tools for agriculture on the table. All of that said, there's going to be an eventual licensee in all likelihood to part or all of this property, and there's going to be a lot more details worked out. The intention, we would never turn this property over to somebody and say, do it whatever you want within the confines of this plan. I believe the management plan should be a broad range of things that prohibit things that certainly shouldn't be allowed and allow for other things, but the specificity and the details of those things will all be worked out in an eventual license. So I don't want the public or anybody to think that this is the final restriction that would be put in place for an eventual end user. That's pretty much, oh, the only other thing I want to say about designating a historical property, I don't want to stir the pot here too much, but I do want to, from a common sense point of view, recognize this is a historic farm. And so there is some friction between saying we want to designate the property historic, but then prohibit agriculture. And for me, I think that that's just an important consideration. Though again, I think, it's paramount, the view shed here, that's been added to the plan. I think anybody in the future who reads this plan would know that's a high priority, and I'm fully supportive of this going to public hearing.
Thank you, Councilman. I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. Look, I think that the acquisition of this property and the preservation of that view shed is critical. But I think as the town functions and operates, this was purchased with agricultural and historical kind of viewings underlying that. And I think we have to be critically important within this document that should there be a need to farm this land in the future, that is not taken away or inhibited in a way. With that said, I do think we have sufficient language in here to ensure that whatever agricultural activity may take place does not impact that watershed adjacent to this, because we understand that to be a damaged water body at this point. And, I wouldn't want to see anything that increases that going on in that water body, but I do think it's critical that should we need, we do still have the ability to have that land in production agriculturally.
So this is a guidance document. It's very similar, and I think it's not precedent setting to any of the other guidance documents and management plans that we had right now. I do appreciate all the concerns and some of the changes that we made in there. I think they're appropriate. The one question I have on here is that we received an email from one of the East Hampton Town trustees, and it'd just be about scheduling of the public hearing. Knowing that we don't have a second public hearing meeting in February, I would maybe prefer if we were to schedule it on the 5th to hear on the 19th of March, potentially.
I would prefer, we have a ADU on the 5th. We have a number of other public hearings on the 5th. There's going to be robust public comment for this. I would like to see us hear it on the 19th.
That's what I mean, schedule.
We could schedule it Thursday for the 19th.
Sure.
Just to get it, and this gives people plenty of notice.
I
Yeah.
think we're getting to the same thing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So to actually have the public hearing on March 19th on there. But overall, I do agree with Ian, and I've said this in the past. There's many different forms of agriculture. We don't know what that's going to be. This allows the guidance document to do that, but also that the town board is the final arbitrator of what will be on that property, and work with all the residents and the residents groups and too.
So you're ready for this to go to public hearing?
I am.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be the dissenting voice here on the agriculture on the property, and that is primarily because of, on page 7, one of the most important reasons for purchasing this property besides the view shed, which is extremely important to the community character, to the entire character of Waynescott. The historic value of this property, and I believe the whole property had historic value, but the water quality improvement ability when we have a pond adjacent, directly adjacent, a shoreline attached, that is one of the most polluted ponds on Long Island, that has blue-green algae that is toxic to everybody, and will take one of the reasons why I thought this purchase was valuable and so important was the water quality improvement that is now able to be made in this pond. The folks had great success with what they did on Georgica Pond with water quality projects, remediating and changing the value of that pond from toxic to, looking at ways to do shellfish there now. And that's a really big important part of why we're doing this. I understand the importance of agriculture. I understand the historic nature of agriculture, but I don't see how we could possibly buffer an adjacent shoreline with a flow rate of probably immediate anything that's put on that land, whether it be organic or non-organic, you still need nitrogen. And that's my problem with allowing agriculture on this property, because I don't believe that there is a buffer that would be adequate to protect that pond unless it was quite dramatic and quite man-made. I think it's good to go to public hearing, but I just want to state my feelings on trying to have two different goals on the same property with the same proximity to a water body that's greatly impaired. So I could go to public hearing. I'd love to hear from the public, but that's my concern.
Okay. All right, so I think, I concur, we should take this to public hearing. And the other thing that, I just want to mention is that many times when we have draft management plans and we adopt them, then we get a licensee, we come back and refine the management plan. So the management plan isn't, that's it for the rest of time. I mean, management plans are a living document and can be, amended from time to time as circumstances change, so.
Yeah, Kathy, I think that's exactly right. And just to comment on Dave's comment and Kate's, I think that the pond is incredibly important, and I think that was likely the trustees' primary concern. Look, I think it's important that this board and future boards work with the trustee. That's their pond, their land, and this property is the access. I fully expect that the town is going to partner with them on important water quality improvement projects. And again, I think that this plan allows for that. So I think it's ready for public hearing on the 19th.
Great. All right, so I would prefer it to go on Thursday night for notice so that people have plenty of notice. Yep. That would be great. Thank you, Scott. All right, so we're up to liaison reports. Tom?
Madam Supervisor, I'll start with the Amagansett Citizens Advisory Committee. We're meeting next Monday, February the 9th, 6:30 p.m. at the Amagansett School Library. Just kind of one other announcement, just a reminder that the MTA bids for the Cranberry Hall Road Bridge are due back later this month, so I will update that as we hear more. The IT department has been working on the configurations of the iBoss kiosks for the resident interface at town OpenGov stations. They've also been working specifically with OpenGov and the fire marshals on their inspections and optimizing their inspections workflow. And then lastly, for IT, there's an update coming to deliver version 2.0 of the building department OpenGov interface. This is to work on flow edits for building department operations, the key criteria being to separate out the more complex applications, say for an entirely new building, against allowing fast tracking of smaller, simpler applications, decks, pools, etc. Again, that's looking to roll out at the end of this month.
So we're kind of calling that OpenGov 2.0 for residential applications.
Correct.
Right.
So can I jump in?
Yes.
Right now with another building department update?
Sure, absolutely.
If you don't mind, Tom, I'm
By all
sorry.
means.
So
Yeah.
it seems timely. And also I just want to point out that to support further reviews and efficiency in the process, I just want to point out, I don't know if it was picked up, that the town retained H2M architects and engineers and spaces architects to assist with building permits review during the period of transition and improvement. I just want to add that on to what's happening with OpenGov.
And so I'll add one also, if you don't mind, just in discussion with Tom saying there, is that in the last month, the town of East Hampton actually has gone to lease a new suite and 300 Panico. Also, the town has most of our entities over there. It's the second one we've done in a couple of years. Code enforcement had one, and we rented a lease at Suite 110. The decision of the town board is we're going to be moving the building department into this new suite, which we believe will be more efficient for the building department, more privacy for the building department, and allow for the public to have even better interface with the building department. It's going to take a transition period of a couple of months here, but at the same time, then that also sets off a domino effect for a couple other departments to be adjusting their locations and also the size of their workspaces then too, which we also put into the capital budget for last year. I'll be working with the building department. And also Steve O'Brien, the head of Buildings and Grounds, our buildings maintenance supervisor, to make that transition appropriately swiftly, and also with the principal building inspector, Richard Normoyle. But it is one that I think is well deserved for the building department based on their staff size and also their importance to the town in general.
Yeah, because we've increased their staffing under Rich. He has made recommendations that we needed additional staff in that department, and the current space is just too tight for them. And this will give them the ability to have more modern facilities.
And to add on to that, we haven't just increased the current staffing, but this also allow for scalability for even more staffing if determined or needed or potentially requested. So overall, it's a very good move, and I think the general public will also, that interface is only going to get better.
Yeah, and just while with that, Jason, I sent over to you, I don't know if you can bring it up or not, but the OpenGov report for the building department for January.
It's up.
Thank you. Thank you so much, man. So for those of you who can't read it, it's very small, but just, there were 313 new records created in the building department in the month of January alone, and 558 permits issued. There is a lot going through that department. I appreciate members of the public, have been challenged that it's not in the timeliness that they're hoping for. We're staffing up to meet these needs. We're making the changes we need to. It's going to take a little bit of time, but, having spent a good morning in there going through what's in OpenGov at the moment, I am confident that I'm seeing a lot of those new housing applications that we saw that rush with in June. We're coming to the end of that, and that's going to be a significant part of breaking the back of that backlog we have going on. So thank you to the building department for the work they have been doing on this.
Yeah. And this week, I know that they're all in code class.
Correct.
So they're in training. So I know there's folks working the counters, but the building inspectors themselves are in training and they are not out doing inspections.
Human Services, there's a health fair this Friday, February 6th, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. at St. Luke's Church Meeting Hall, 18 James Lane, East Hampton. It's a free health fair offering flu shots. Please get one if you haven't. That's just my personal opinion. Glucose exams, blood pressure screening, health insurance representation, offering information, food stamp, SNAP information, mental health resources, nutrition educator. There'll also be representatives from the retreat, Sun River Health, Meals on Wheels, and the town of East Hampton. The congregate meal program for the week of January 26th through January 30th, we saw 61 seniors served. The grab and go meal program for that same week, we saw 75 seniors served. The Human Services case manager will be attending the retreat's first full day abuse in later life interactive community conversation professionals, which will be taking place Wednesday, February 4th at the Riverhead Free Library from 9:15 a.m. to 5:15 p.m. This abuse later in life project is a national initiative funded by the Department of Justice Office of Violence Against Women, the OVW, and represents an important opportunity for Suffolk County to strengthen our collective response to abuse impacting adults ages 50 and older. This is a very real issue. If you are someone who does experience this abuse, please do reach out. We have a fantastic team in our Human Services Department, and we can get you help.
Yeah, I attended the first round of work sessions, and it was Diane and myself, and also Lieutenant Dan Toya, representing the police department, was there. It was folks from all levels of government and not-for-profits that are working together on that initiative.
Thank you. And lastly, just to wish Diane Patricio, our department head, hope she's feeling better. She's out sick today. Moving down to fire commissioners and fire safety, there's a meeting Montauk Downs on February 10th at 6 p.m. to update the community on the state's initiative to address the fire load risk from the pine beetle situation in Napeague. Myself and my colleagues attended a presentation last week. I have to say that the work that the state's done there through the town supervisor and the governor has been phenomenal. I truly encourage people to attend that to see some of the visuals. It's been a real work in actually getting that situation addressed. So thank you, Madam Supervisor.
And I could keep interrupting you, Tom. For those that can't make it to the Montauk Downs on February 10th, LTV is filming it, so they'll be able to watch it on YouTube.
Thank you. The Wildlife Committee, we met last week. We had two guest speakers in, Bo Payne, who is the Marine Patrol Officer for Shelter Island, who also oversees their deer management program, and John Brochetta, who is a private contractor who works across the island in addressing deer management properties. Very interesting conversation, still very much in the early stages. We have the presentation from the TIC Advisory Committee scheduled for the 10th of March out in Montauk. I would like to have the Wildlife Committee do a presentation, possibly follow early the next month, just to update on what their recommendations might be in terms of management of deer. Then lastly, The Emergency Preparedness Committee met last week, two-part meeting. One was to kind of get feedback from committee members on our response to the state of emergency that was declared. The two pieces of feedback came back there were, one, they thought the communication to the town public was excellent. It was timely and effective, so there was that. And also the snow removal. Look, it's been a challenge, but we had reports from EMS groups across the town of, when there were situations that people had to be dug out or plowed out, the highway department was there forthwith and very effective in helping get people to emergency care, final destination. So thank you to our department for that. I'm sure, David, you're going to speak to that a little bit more as well. And that's it for me.
I'll speak to it now. So I heard the same combination at the Montauk CAC last night about the snow removal efforts. There was a tremendous amount of snow. I want to thank Steve Lynch and all his crews, and also Steve O'Brien and his crews, and independent contractors. Even more specifically, it was to the action that the supervisor had the leadership to actually have the snow removed from our central business districts of North Main Street, Amagansett, and also Montauk, then too, with contractors, not knowing if we were going to get another foot of snow or not. We just missed that one. My family's down in North Carolina, the Outer Banks. It is a mess down there right now. They didn't have school last week, and they haven't had school this week because they just don't have the equipment. So the foresight to actually have that snow removed, just in case if there was another storm, is one thing, but also to continue to have commerce also, which is so important in the off season, because there's their one day of missing commerce for some of the stores down there in the off season. That could have a huge trickle-down effect. There were a lot of kudos to you, Madam Supervisor, for that yesterday at the Montauk CAC.
It was tremendous coordination. I mean, we met that Thursday morning before we put together, a text thread of 17 of us that kept each other in the loop of what was going on. Our emergency coordinator, Bruce Bates, was invaluable. The communication with Steve Lynch, our highway superintendent, David, I reached out to you numerous times. Patrick, a public information officer, like for some of us, people had a day off and a weekend that they got to, kind of hunker down, but we were busy all day fielding phone calls, putting out social media messages, but I think it was really helpful. And again, Steve and his team on the back end, after the roads were cleared, the folks calling our office saying, I can't get to my mailbox, or, they needed, somehow my road got missed, it's urban renewal, can you help me out? It was really well orchestrated, and it was a great team effort.
I'd be very interested, sorry, Tom, I'd be very interested with the cold snap here to see if it did anything to the tick population, or also to the southern pine beetle also, into the deer population. Because I don't remember a cold snap like this. In
years.
Yeah,
that came up in my CAC last night.
Yeah. I did see, the last thing I'd say on this is look, I mean, this is when we as a community come together. There's so much we have of resources as town, your fire districts, but if you know neighbors who are snowed in or whose mailboxes are there, or if you see your fire hydrant on your street is covered up by snow, please get out there with your shovel and start digging. I mean, I'm doing that this weekend with some volunteers in Montauk just to ensure all the fire hydrants are accessible. And I encourage you as community members to get involved and do that. That's what makes this place special.
Steve Lynch said there's nearly 5,000 tons of snow removed from central business districts. We were trying to calculate potentially based on the contractors, the payloaders. That's a lot of weight, a lot of snow, but it needed to be done. Also moving forward to the Montauk CAC from last night, two main things we had for discussion. We discussed the Edgemere Road in Montauk about potential new parking changes. They're asking the county to go from no parking to no stopping, but also to include that on some of the areas around the train station. There were a couple of property owners that were there last night that were supportive of it. I would like to see if we can put that on for a town board discussion next week.
Sure.
Also in Montauk then too. But it was met with some questions, but mostly all support. Also, what we discussed is the Gosman's parking lot, just north of Gosman's, the town parking lot north of Gosman's on the inlet, about changing of parking time restrictions there. Currently, there's 1 hour parking. We're looking to potentially change that to 2 hour parking and sign it, because that rolls right into the Montauk dredge update then too. There was nearly 98,000 cubic yards of sand placed on that beach. It's a big beach there right now. How long does it last? I don't know. I'm not even going to bet you a beer on it, but trust me, I would bet a beer all day, but not on that one. Don't know why I said that. Either way, it's going to be used as a beach, but it's also the only commercial parking lot that we have in that commercial area. So that was met with actually primarily with compliments to do so. A lot of people did not know there was already parking restrictions in there, so maybe we can even discuss that next week quickly. The reason why I bring these up is to get these enacted and brought back and approved by the state. We sort of have to work on it now to have it ready for May.
So just, David, on that one, just do we need to do anything to improve access to that beach? Because as it stands, we have that kind of one crossover from the parking lot. But if we're going to have significant sand there, you know, I see people often kind of stepping over the rocks, which is a little treacherous with that guardrail. Is there consideration to do that perhaps?
So those areas of the rocks have been mostly covered over. I actually saw someone driving on it the other day. I've never seen someone drive on that beach before. Yeah, you know, that's how big of a beach it is.
Yeah.
We're planning, once they finish the installation of the sand, the town will probably be putting sand fencing in there to give dedicated spaces to be able to actually protect the dune, trap the sand, but also to go over from some of the parking lots. I wouldn't mind even looking at repaving the parking lot there, putting the handicap parking spots in place and designating access, but that's another layer onto it.
Okay.
Also. But yes, Tom, we're looking at that also. We made sure, requesting with the Army Corps of Engineers to bolster the dune area by the guardrails there also, so it's safe, but also if that technically is sacrificial sand to go into the littoral drift area, but it would bolster our infrastructure by putting more sand there. So we did that a little bit. They can still continue to work. That project still is working. They're working on about 1,000 cubic yards of hard digging, they call it right now, to go between the tips. And that project will last until at least next week. So maybe we come back to discuss this in March on there. But it's moving ahead. Let's see here. Montauk Beach crossovers, I already discussed that a little bit earlier. The only other thing, two other things I have is about the Lowenstein pipe. There were intrusions to the Lowenstein pipe. Those have been actually rectified and re-sleeved, and we're going to be looking at that water course coming up shortly, working with Highway and also Melissa McCarron for Natural Resources. That might be something we'll bring back to the board upcoming. And lastly, I went to the meeting of the East Hampton Volunteer Ocean Rescue in Montauk. I want to thank all the members of the East Hampton Volunteer Ocean Rescue. We'll have a resolution on to reappoint them all, the swimmers, for this calendar year. That will be on Thursday, but also let everyone know that they elected and awarded the member of the year. That member of the year is Charlie Goldsmith. Charlie is also a member of the Amagansett Fire Department and also a lieutenant for the Lifeguarding Corps in the Montauk District then too. So congrats to Charlie Goldsmith. So Charlie, I've had a history with Charlie. Charlie, actually, when he was growing up, he did a senior project. This had to be 2010 or maybe 9. And he was still in school at the time when he was doing when drones just became new. And we needed some photos for the Amagansett Life Saving Station. And we used his photos within our submission for to go into National Historical Register, which we got that building. So his photos are actually in the National Archives in Washington. Also, pretty neat, right? Yeah. So anyway, sorry, Charlie. You see him, say thank you to him. Great member. Lastly, I want to say my condolences to my family, and I think I speak on behalf of the board, to you, Tom, and your family for the loss of your family member. I had a chance to meet him one time, a couple of times, but the one time I remember, it was at a birthday party for the kids, and it was just he was hysterical. He was kind to me always. And my condolences. I wish you prayers of strength and remembrance at this time to you and your family.
Thank you, Mary. Appreciate it.
You're here, Tom. Kate, okay. I just want to alert folks that I have two resolutions on for Thursday. One is an amendment to a previously adopted resolution authorizing the contract with James Lima and Development for the Sustainable Planning in Coastal Communities Risk Reduction, Revitalization, and Restoration Grant. That's a long name. And this is an update on costs and consultant rates as per our updated schedule for what we'd like to see the contractor and the grant maintain. So this is an update and a little bit of a breakdown on will be mentioned in the reso on the costs. And this signifies a moment where we'll be sending the completed signed contracts to the state for approval and then starting to work on the project advisory committee and moving the grant project forward. Also, I have a resolution on, Jean Carrozza mentioned it, regarding an RFP for technology for short-term rentals. I had given a presentation to the town board last year on short-term rentals and an analysis of the impacts on the town in terms of how the number of them, et cetera. And the board had decided that we should look into technological solution, as other towns have done for monitoring rentals, and we had approved $30,000 in the budget for that purpose, and now the RFP will be going out. I have it on for Thursday, and just want to give some details about what it is. So the town of East Hampton is seeking proposals from qualified vendors to provide a comprehensive technology solution to manage and ensure compliance with local regulations regarding the town's rental registry governed by Town Code Chapter 199. This solution will help streamline the enforcement of the regulations, enhance monitoring capabilities, and facilitate easier management of residential rental properties within the municipality. I'll just skip down a little bit here. The rental registry requires property owners to provide local contact information, have a registration number in all ads, comply with occupancy limits, complete safety inspections, and adhere to established neighborhood standards. The rental registry also supports enforcement efforts and transparency, helping the town monitor rental activity, respond to complaints, and better understand the cumulative impacts of short-term rentals on housing supply and community character. Per data from AirDNA, the town of East Hampton in August of 2025 had 1,838 active short-term rental listings. The town is comprised of two submarkets, according to AirDNA, one submarket being East Hampton and an additional separate submarket being Montauk. High daily rates during peak seasons contribute to substantial annual revenues, highlighting the seasonal and tourist-driven nature of rentals. According to the U.S. Census data 2020, the town of East Hampton has approximately 19,801 total housing units. Therefore, 1,838 housing units represent about 9.3% of the total residential housing units in East Hampton. Effective regulation of short-term rentals poses challenges, particularly concerning enforcement and compliance. Advanced technology could assist in mitigating non-compliance risks, reducing the enforcement burden, and minimizing the need for additional staffing. The town board is committed to leveraging technology to enhance compliance and streamline local regulations. The objectives are as follows: automated compliance monitoring to track short-term rental properties and ensure they adhere local regulations, facilitate reporting, providing tools for residents and staff to report non-compliance issues easily, and enhance data management, offering a robust system for managing, storing, and analyzing data related to short-term rentals. And as we look at everything else, recording and analyzing the data is the first step to either actions or no actions. So I just wanted to alert everybody to that, what was the essence of that resolution, both of those on Thursday. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Kate. Ian?
Community Housing Advisory Board met last week, and I just want to thank Katie Casey, who was a guest there. She was speaking about the 114 middle income project that's upcoming, specifically or mostly about 2 grants that they've received from New York State. Thank you, Kathy, for working on that. One of those was a wastewater drainage and water, basically an infrastructure project. That's a matching grant that Chad was supportive of, and that'll come back to the board later. And the other was a market feasibility study, which I anticipate that was, I think, just a straight grant from the state. And I anticipate that will not only benefit this particular project, but also give us some more color about the existing conditions of the affordable housing needs. So we're very grateful for both of those grants. Lastly, on a sadder note, I want to say that Ray Hardin, who's been a really great member of that committee, is stepping down. He's contributed a lot, grateful for all of his help. And he's a guy around town, and I'm sure he will continue to help, but won't be a member of that committee. And with that in mind, I just want to tell the public that we'll be looking for a new member from the building industry. That committee has particular members that have to fill a slot, so to speak. And to replace Ray, we'll need to find somebody from the building industry. So fellow board members, public, anybody who might be interested in that, please let me know. Last month, the Property Management Committee met. The main topic of conversation was the Osborne Homestead, which we already discussed, the management plan. But we also went over our priorities for 2026, and there are some exciting things ahead. The Dodge property is currently or the Parsons Dodge property, rather, is currently undergoing engineering. I'm hoping to get through the engineering and perhaps even to the construction phase of the main house, and then perhaps even more excitingly is the Henry Mitchell house. There was a small house on that property that was thought to be Henry Mitchell's house, who was an agricultural laborer from the mid to late 1800s. We commissioned Bob Hefner to look into that, to remove some more modern walls to expose the original, and he came back with a great report that we'll post online. Anybody interested in East Hampton history, Hugh King, looking at you, Dave Catalano.
Dave Lees.
Dave Lees. He already commented on the report. It's great. And, that came out of the Property Management Committee. We thought there was an original report that said maybe this was what that house was. And through one of those meetings, members of the committee and the public said, well, why don't we just look at it now? We did that. And I think everything we discovered was, important and good. Lastly, with the Dodge property, I'm hoping to get an RFP to get a licensee in there as soon as we have a path forward with the physical improvements. And I'm also hoping that process will start or even conclude in 2026. Other upcoming projects, and just thanks again to Bob Hefner. The report, the quality of that work was incredible.
It's one of the best I've seen from.
Yeah,
it was great.
It's a small structure, but historically really important for a segment of our community that there just isn't much, physical.
It's a work session agenda item.
Yeah,
for sure.
It is.
Yeah. Sure. Absolutely. But I'm thanking him now anyway, and we'll do that again whenever we talk about it. Other upcoming projects, the Edwards House at Duck Creek is undergoing engineering. And hopefully that can also commence in 2026. And lastly, or not lastly, but the next one is the Osborne House, which has some physical issues. We've discussed this already, but we're trying to make the house watertight, just the exterior. And as we go through, finalizing the management plan and finding a licensee, we'll talk about the interior. But that, again, I think is on for 2026. And last but certainly not least is the Fisher House, which we've already committed funding to. Dave Lees presented this, and that work I think is going to commence shortly. So there's some real progress with the maintenance of historical structures on CPF land, and that's a good thing because we have, all of these gems, but it's now our job to take care of them, and I think we're making real strides to do that. Another meeting I had actually just yesterday was a meeting about accessory staff housing. This came up as part of the affordable housing issue that we have in town, and through previous conversations, the board was, preliminarily supportive of the idea of businesses that can host staff workers on their current site as an accessory use is something we'll look into. Met with members from the planning department, Tina Lagaran and Eric Shantz, Mark Morgan Perez from housing, and Ed Reale, the attorney who's focused on housing. It was a very productive meeting. It's still preliminary stages, but I'm optimistic that we'll have something to bring back to this board for another discussion. And just full disclosure, when that happens, I don't anticipate it being fully baked, but I want to get it out there so that we hear from the public. You know, there's always this conversation about how much public involvement, and to me, I want to involve the whole public as opposed to just cherry picking a few people. And I'm hoping that'll, you know, can be as soon as March or April. I also just want to piggyback a little bit on what Tom said about the New York State Parks meeting, about the fire concern in Napeague and in Montauk. Look, we met last year with members of the fire departments, and there was some real concern about what the town and the state were going to do with dead trees. And at that meeting we had last week, it was all positive. They were really supportive of the track that the state was on, and that was just really, really good to hear. You know, again, we took a little bit of heat. There was some pressure, I think, in terms of what we were doing. I know there was already work being done by Kathy and Tom on this, but it was just nice to see that the culmination of the work that's been happening and will be ongoing, you know, perfectly aligned with what the fire department needed. And frankly, I wasn't sure it was going to be, you know, that smooth and well accepted, but it was. And that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Ian. So I was going to talk about dispatch, but when the chief was here, I let him do my liaison report there. Citizen Police Academy. So we've sent out a press release. We're going to be posting on social media. We're now accepting applications for the 2026 Citizen Police Academy. The goal is to foster transparency, trust, and understanding by providing residents with an insider's view of law enforcement operations and decision-making. This is a free 10-session program. It meets one evening a week from 6 to 9 p.m., running from March 4th through May 13th, 2026. And participation is for town residents who are 17 years of age or older and possess a valid driver's license, and the application deadline is Wednesday, February 25th. I also just want to let my colleagues know you'll be getting an email, if you haven't already, from Aileen, that I have forwarded a letter to Governor Hochul this morning in support of her initiative for the Local Cops, Local Crimes Act. Our local law enforcement should be focused on protecting public safety in our neighborhoods, not acting as agents of federal immigration enforcement. This legislation preserves that focus while still allowing appropriate cooperation with federal authorities in legitimate criminal investigations. We did have the East Hampton CAC met last night, but I'm going to bring their comments to the meeting on next week on Tuesday. And while I'm talking about the meeting next week on Tuesday, just want to remind folks, there are only 3 town board meetings in February. We meet again on the 5th, Thursday the 5th at 6. And then we have a work session on February 10th in Montauk, but we have no meetings the week of the 16th. So there's no work session on the 17th or a night meeting on the 19th because we would not have had a quorum at the meeting because several of us are going on vacation during the school break. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was Saturday night, I attended a fundraiser at the Talk House put on by Pitch Your Peers, and it was a fundraiser for 4 of our local food pantries, Montauk, East Hampton, Springs, and Sag Harbor. And it was a comedy night, and it was sold out, and the Talk House donated everything for the event. But we learned there that last week, 3,000 of our neighbors availed themselves of groceries at one of our 4 local food pantries. Half of those, 1,500, were at the Springs Food Pantry alone. So there is a great need out there, and to the community at large, if you can afford to make a donation, you know, big or small, please consider supporting our local food pantries because your neighbors would otherwise go hungry. So that's what I've got for my liaison report. And do I have a motion to go into executive?
A couple of resolutions first.
Oh, yes, resolutions.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
So it's my privilege to offer resolution 2026-266 is authorize a payment of prior invoice to East End Lines Incorporated in the amount of $100.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. 267 is authorized payment of prior year invoice to Best Climate Control Corp. In the amount of $833.98.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. 268 is authorized payment to PSE&G from 2024 in the amount of $1,532.84.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. 269 is amend resolution 2026-223. This is 2025 budget modification where we're decreasing budget lines subcontractor for 21,000 road surfacing material, for 22,000 New York State retirement, 8,000. We're increasing the lines for subcontracting costs for snow removal in the amount of $51,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. 270 is authorized payment for prior year invoice for the aquaculture department in the amount of $2,189.90.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
271 is a secret determination to classify the action, assume role in lead agency and adopt a negative declaration pursuant to secret for the proposed project of the Honorable Fred Thiel Recreation Facility. This project is to relocate volleyball course, expand parking, and also to centralize parking.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have Resolution 2026-272. This is to accept a grant of scenic and conservation easement. Public hearing was held by the town board on January 22nd on a proposed grant of scenic and conservation easement. Resolved that the town hereby accepts the easement. The grantor is Hampton's LN LLC. It's located at 31 Hampton Lane, Amagansett, and the reviewing agency is the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 273 is also accept a grant of a scenic and conservation easement. A public hearing was held by the town board on January 22nd on the proposed grant of a scenic and conservation easement. Resolved that the town hereby accepts the easement. The grantor is Joseph Macri and Kim Stoller. This is at 20 Bendigo Road, Amagansett. The reviewing agency is the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 274 authorizes payment of prior year invoice to EV Connect, and this is in an amount not to exceed $1,147.38.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 2026-275 is to retain AKRF for professional services related to Wayne Scott Commercial Center, whereas the Town of East Hampton Planning Department and Planning Board have been working with AKRF for professional environmental planning services and technical review relating to the Wayne Scott Commercial Center subdivision application, supplemental draft environmental impact statement, where the project review is not complete and the professional environmental planning services, technical and subsurface environmental consulting services are still required to support the Planning Department, whereas AKRF has provided a proposal to the town dated January 14th for an amount not to exceed $100,000. Resolved that all invoices relating to the services be paid from the appropriate budget line, and the resolution is effective extending retroactively from January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 276 is Planning Department retained consulting services for 2026. This is whereas Vincent Guardello and the Rayner Group have submitted a proposal dated January 7th, 2026, and a rate sheet dated January 2nd. Resolved that Vincent Guardello from Rayner Group is hereby engaged to provide engineering services on an on-call and as-needed basis with costs to be paid from the appropriate budget account, total not to exceed $45,000, again retroactive from January 1st, 2026 through December 31st, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 277 is Planning Department retaining professional services from Fine Arts and Science LLC for 2026, whereas the Planning Department continues to review a large volume of initiatives, including both critical long-term planning projects and development applications before the Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals, whereas the Planning Department has determined outside professional services are necessary. Resolved that Fine Arts and Services LLC will be retained and compensated an hourly rate of $225 per hour and an amount not to exceed $35,000, retroactive from January 1st through December 31st, 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 278, this is to authorize the installation of a concrete slab at Stephen Hans Path. This is for ADA accessible chess table at the Fred Thiel Junior Recreational Facilities, and this was funded by 2023 CDBG funding. The award was to Stasi, the quote was from Stasi Industries, and the amount is $7,800.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 279, this is to update resolutions 2025-1637, 2025-1638, and 2025-1639. We authorized interior cleaning services and gutter cleaning at various homes in the town's home ownership program, and this is to update that for 2026.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 280, this is to authorize testing and remediation services for Eastern Environmental for 54 tub oarsmen, and the amount is $5,980.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 281, this is to Rasein Consultant, Justin Horning. This is for the town's affordable housing home ownership program, first-time home buyer down payment assistance program, and the home improvement program. He will review applications at a rate of $50 per application and a total sum not to exceed $10,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Resolution 282, this is to authorize past year invoice for Justin Horning. Again, this is through the Office of Housing and Community Development, and the total amount is $150.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 283, this is a 2025 budget modification for Office of Housing and Community Development. This will increase the revenue budget line for appropriated fund balance in the amount of $5,121. Will increase the expenditure budget line for subcontractor costs in the same amount. Will decrease repairs general in the amount of $1,200 and increase the subcontractor costs in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have Resolution 2026-284, that's to increase the cap for Dellett Spellman Barrett LLP, Ellis versus Town of East Hampton 2025, constituting a total of $29,900 for the 25 calendar year.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
285 is a 2025 budget modification for the Finance Department for year-end retiree health insurance costs. We're decreasing contingency, $35,000, and increasing health insurance retiree in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
286 is to amend Resolution 2026-160 and the 2026 budget modification for the Supervisor's Office, and we're looking to decrease office expense in the amount of $731 and increase travel, conferences, and dues in the same amount.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I have an additional resolution, and this is Resolution 2026-287, and it's to authorize an employee suspension.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to go into the executive session to discuss CPF litigation, real estate pending, more pending litigation, and personnel.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.